Sony just raised the price of a used refurbished PS5 to more than what many people still remember paying for a brand new launch console, and that absurdity is strong enough to make you see red. Right now, the certified refurbished PS5 Slim Digital on PlayStation Direct costs $499, while the certified refurbished PS5 Slim Disc costs $549, which is the number that makes this story hit ordinary buyers in the chest. Already, that disc price matters for another reason, because $549 is higher than the launch price many people still associate with a brand new PS5, so Sony has managed to make used official hardware sound more expensive than old new hardware in one sentence. Push Square reported that both refurbished Slim models jumped by $100, Shacknews reported the same increase, and Sony's own storefront reflects those updated numbers, which means the receipts line up cleanly without anyone needing to fill gaps with guesswork. Basically, this is not rumor, not internet telephone, and not one stray screenshot turned into a fake outrage loop, because the reporting, the listings, and the current store prices all point to the same ugly conclusion. First, define what official refurbished is supposed to mean to a normal buyer who is not hunting for prestige, not chasing launch day status, and not looking for a lecture about market forces when he only wants a sensible deal. Second, Sony says these systems are recertified, fully tested, and held to the same functional standards as new products, which covers the quality side of the pitch clearly enough for anyone reading the page. Third, Sony also says buyers get a 12-month manufacturer warranty, so the company is plainly selling reassurance along with the hardware, instead of pretending these units are random mystery boxes pulled from a warehouse corner. Fourth, the listings say the consoles may show minor cosmetic imperfections, and that part is perfectly normal because cosmetic wear is exactly the kind of trade buyers already expect when they choose refurbished instead of factory fresh. Fifth, the important distinction is that the machine is not the problem here, the certification is not the problem here, and the warranty is not the problem here, because the entire complaint begins and ends with the number sitting next to the word refurbished. Normally, official refurbished lives in a very simple place between full-price new retail and unpredictable second-hand resale, which is why the category works in the first place for people who care about both money and risk. Traditionally, buyers accept prior ownership, possible scuffs, and missing new box freshness in exchange for meaningful savings, lower stress, and a real safety net, so the category succeeds when the compromise still feels financially smart. Practically, that means the product can be used as long as the math feels attractive enough to justify it, and once the math stops doing that job, the label starts losing its power no matter how clean the marketing language sounds. Then Sony accidentally leaves its strongest piece of evidence on the same storefront by keeping an older certified refurbished launch model PS5 listed at $399, which turns a general complaint into a direct comparison problem. Suddenly, one official refurbished PS5 in this generation looks like an actual refurb price, while the newer slim refurbished models look like something else entirely, and that gap is what makes the whole story stop sounding abstract. Here comes the math moment that should stay on screen long enough for viewers to absorb it, because the older refurbished launch model costs $399, the refurbished slim digital costs $499, and the refurbished slim disc costs $549. Mathematically, the slim disc refurb sits $150 above the older official refurb inside the same console generation, which is the kind of comparison that does more damage than any amount of dramatic yelling ever could. Sony is effectively charging a $150 premium for the same generation's basic class of machine, because it now lives inside a smaller plastic shell with current model branding attached to it. Seriously, that does not feel like a meaningful jump for someone who is specifically shopping refurbished, and it definitely does not feel like the kind of difference that should command roughly a 37% premium over the older official refurb. Call it a desk space tax, call it a convenience tax, or call it premium vibes for used hardware. But do not call it an obvious bargain, because bargains are not supposed to make buyers reopen the page just to check whether they misread the number. Meanwhile, Sony had already raised prices on new PS5 hardware earlier in April, which matters because this refurb increase does not land as one isolated adjustment sitting quietly on a product page by itself. Viewed together, the pattern is easy to understand. The premium route moved up first, and then the supposed fallback route moved up after it. So the cheaper option no longer feels like relief so much as a smaller version of the same pain. Late adopters feel that pattern first because they are usually the people who wait for stronger libraries, calmer pricing, better bundles, and clearer value before they step into a console generation that looked too expensive at launch. Usually, year 6 is when entry should feel easier to justify, not stranger to explain, because older hardware is supposed to become a more comfortable purchase, as time does the work that launch hype and scarcity once did. Instead, Sony is asking cautious buyers to look at refurbished prices that still carry premium energy, which cuts directly against the normal instinct people have about aging tech becoming easier to recommend over time. Another reason this lands hard is the split between the refurbished Slim Digital at $499 and the refurbished Slim Disc at $549, because that extra $50 is not just a line item. For viewers who care about ownership, that $50 gap buys the strongest remaining path to physical media on the platform, including access to used games, borrowing, collecting, resale, retailer competition, and a little distance from total digital dependence. Remember, the disc model is not merely a hardware variant in this conversation, it is the option that preserves the most control for buyers who do not want every future decision filtered through one corporate storefront and its changing rules. Worse, a refurbished disc PS5 at $549 costs more than the launch price many people still remember for a brand new PS5, which is the kind of sentence that lands emotionally before the analysis even catches up. Emotionally, ordinary viewers do not need a lecture in economics to know that used official hardware sounding pricier than old new hardware feels upside down, and that instant recognition is why this topic has such clean viewer appeal. Visually, the smartest move is to put the $399 older refurb, the $499 Slim Digital refurb, and the $549 Slim Disc refurb in one side-by-side ladder, and let the picture do half the work. That ladder lets distracted viewers understand the problem instantly, which matters on YouTube because numbers stick when the eye can keep pace with the argument. Underneath, add the old launch price reminder and Sony's own warranty and cosmetic imperfections language, because that combination lets the audience compare the promise, the condition, and the price without getting lost in extra narration. Receipts beat drama with a story like this, so show push square, show Shack News, show Sony's own listing language, and show the disclaimer text up close enough that viewers can judge the trade with their own eyes. Because the proof is this clean, you do not need to overperform the anger. And in fact the story gets stronger when the script sounds like a calm walkthrough of numbers that already condemn the pricing by themselves. Notice how simple the argument becomes once the comparisons sit together. Sony raised official refurbished Slim prices by $100. Sony still has an older official refurb at $399, and the physical media version now carries the nastiest tag. Everything after that is buyer impact. And the buyer impact is not mysterious because the official lower cost path into PS5 now looks weaker, the ownership friendly path now looks harder to reach, and the category itself looks less trustworthy as a value lane. None of this means Sony is selling bad machines, and saying that would actually weaken the criticism, because the smarter point is that working hardware with a real warranty can still be packaged inside bad value. Good criticism separates product quality from pricing logic, and this story works precisely because the product side stays mostly intact while the pricing side collapses under comparison. Abstraction is usually how companies defend ugly pricing, since vague talk about market conditions, strategies, supply chains, and global pressure can blur almost any number if the discussion stays vague enough for long enough. Direct comparison destroys that fog immediately, because the buyer can see the older official refurb at $399, the Slim Digital refurb at $499, and the Slim Disc refurb at $549 without needing a consultant to interpret the screen. Once those numbers sit together, the argument stops being theoretical and becomes personal, since the viewer can imagine himself choosing between them and feeling the exact moment where refurbished stops sounding like the smart adult option. Personally, I think that is why this story has more legs than a generic price hike rant, because it is clear in one sentence, visual in one frame, and personal in one purchase decision without needing dramatic scaffolding. Ultimately, the whole issue can be reduced to a question. If official refurbished no longer feels like a meaningful deal, how much value does the label itself still carry for the people it is supposed to reassure? So here is the line in the sand. Is a certified sticker worth paying near new money, or even more than the old new price in people's memory, for someone else's cosmetic imperfections and prior ownership? Whatever answer people give, the frustration makes sense, because Sony is trying to keep the language of the sensible middle option, while weakening the part that made that option sensible in the first place. Sony did not improve the bargain shelf, Sony did not expand the affordable lane, and Sony did not make official refurbished easier to recommend. Sony simply priced used hardware like buyer patience was just another resource to mine.